Hello, everyone. We are in some serious final boss energy. I've been a bit quiet. I don't know about you, but the energy has been really strange. I've been absolutely flattened, feeling exhausted, and huge roller coaster ups and downs of being really in divine bliss and then crashing back down again. It's been very unsettled. And I've had to follow my own advice and take some time away to sit with it, to rest and to recalibrate and really listen to myself and to my body. And now we seem to be in some big time final boss energy. Um, in many of my readings for my clients and in many of my own readings for myself and speaking to my spirit guides and various beings, um, there is a sense that collectively we are facing a challenge. But although it's happening collectively, the challenges themselves are individual. And so you may find yourself facing the thing you've been putting off for a very long time, the thing you thought you dealt with, the thing you've been denying to yourself, the thing that you dreaded, the thing that you knew was coming but hoping it never would. There's that kind of final karmic battle energy to where we are collectively at the moment. And it's almost like we have to, all of us, face our fears, but those fears are very individual. And as a result, there's been some very interesting beings coming in to support with that. And two of the most notable that seem to be coming up a lot for clients and for me are Merlin and Branwen. Now, what's very interesting about Merlin stepping in is that the asteroid Merlin is around at the moment as well. He's quite predominant in the sky. Now, I'm not an astrologer, so I can't really tell you where he is. I've not looked it up, but he will be prevalent. If he comes up a lot for you, I would recommend looking where the asteroid is in your natal chart. And there's free things online that you can use to do that. Astro.com, AstroSeek, things like that have an advanced option where you can look up asteroids in your natal chart. And Branwen is a very interesting person. She is revered now in modern paganism as a goddess. However, to the Britons, she is an ancestral spirit, a grandmother, a great grandmother figure. And what both her and Merlin have in common is that they faced extremely human challenges. And whilst Merlin is now an ascended master and Branwen is a guardian spirit of her ancestors and those who need her help, both had extremely challenging lives and crises. And I think that's why they're coming to us now, particularly because we're not only facing a crunch point collectively, culturally, globally, but we're also facing our collective crunch points now, karmically. Certainly in the next month to 2 months, I would say. That's how it feels in the energy. And Merlin is famous for many escapades, but he is someone that, on a very human level, faced very everyday challenges that were very hard that we also face. He faced extreme grief. He saw his nephews killed. He saw his friends and his sponsors killed. He had an extreme obsession with Nimue, um, the Lady of the Lake, that we would now probably align with limerence, an obsessive love that wasn't based on the reality of the situation. And so he battled very overwhelming human emotions and what would you describe limerence as? Obsessive love, probably not an emotion, but a psychological state that is very challenging. And to the point where he had a nervous breakdown, and like many people have to do, had to retreat from the world to recover. He went into the forest, which is very wise, and we now know that is very good for you to go into nature. And forest bathing from Japan has been shown to lower your cortisol and your adrenaline levels, and is now a worldwide practice. Um, and so the lessons there are not just facing very human challenges, but listening to yourself and doing what your body and your mind and your soul needs in order to recover yourself. And both those things are really important for us at the moment in the energy that we're in and we're going to be in. It's coming. And it's coming fast and it's coming soon. And I think if you're prepared and you know that energy is coming, it's it makes you a lot better able to deal with it, and it makes you a lot more successful in the test because it does feel test-like, which is why I described it as a final boss energy. It doesn't feel like an initiation. It feels like an opportunity to discard things that we no longer need in our life on a purging karmic level. Even karma we've accrued in this life. I'm not necessarily talking about past life karma, although it can be, and it is for many people. It may also be karma that you've accrued in this life, things you've been avoiding in this life, things that have happened that you regret or you could have done better or differently, coming back round for you to do it all over again. Mercury's just gone retrograde on the 29th. And people misunderstand a lot of the time thinking, Mercury retrograde is problems with communication, and it can be miscommunication, but it can also be things coming back from the past. So it's very apt that the energy is where it is at the moment and the alignment of the stars is where they are at the moment. Now, how does Branwen come into this? Well, Branwen is a figure of balance. She's the figure of the midpoint, the balancing point, the pivot. And I think that word's quite important right now. Branwen, you may know her story. I'm not going to recount it in great detail here because it's very long, and I would not to include all the details would do it a disservice. But a very abridged version is that Branwen married the king, one of the kings of Ireland. I think you pronounce his name Atholwich. I may be wrong. As almost like a political allegiance. The Irish had been invading the west coast of Wales. There'd been a lot of skirmishes and battles, and Bran, the Raven King, his name means raven, wanted to make peace. And what better way to do that than to marry your sister to the King of Ireland? Why would you attack your wife's family, right? So that was Bran's side of it. And there was a lot of bad blood on the Welsh side. They were very upset about what the Irish had been doing. In fact, King Arthur comes into this as well, because King Arthur was involved in driving the Irish out of Wales. And it's actually the blue stones from Stonehenge are fabled to have been brought there by King Arthur from the Preseli Hills in Wales as a war booty, basically, where he helped win the battles for the Welsh and took the standing stones as payment, as war booty from where potentially the Irish built them there. That's contested. And from Matholwich's side, he had designs on Bran's throne. And what better way to legitimize your claim to the Welsh throne if you can't win it through battle than your son and heir be the heir to Bran's throne through his sister Branwen, the White Raven. So again, you've got this image of the black and the white raven, the yin and the yang, the balance with Bran and Branwen. And so Branwen agreed finally to marry Matholwich. I don't think she was very keen initially. But during the celebrations, before they'd even left for Ireland, one of her brothers who couldn't let bygones be bygones, who couldn't let the past go, who couldn't forgive and forget, who couldn't get over the invasions and the battles that and the incursions of the Irish on the Welsh territories. And so he mutilated the Irish's horses when their delegation was over. And obviously horses to the Brythonic and Celtic peoples, for want of a better word, it was tribal. We'll use Celtic to describe them, although I am aware that it's a disputed and modern term. And to those peoples, being horseback riders, the very earliest versions of what became Canicht to the Anglo-Saxons and then knights to the medieval chivalric culture, it was an enormous and incredibly politically damaging act. There was outrage. The Irish wanted to slaughter all the Welsh delegation, call off the wedding, and all because this one brother couldn't manage his own emotions, couldn't regulate his emotions, couldn't quell his anger, couldn't move on from the past. And I think that's a key lesson in the energies of the moment, moving on from the past, finding a way, not necessarily to forgive, but and not even to forget, but to manage how you feel about a situation and find a different way of framing it that makes it sit more easily, more peacefully in your soul. And so this brother couldn't. And, there was a huge furore. It was very red wedding-y from Game of Thrones, And Bran managed to smooth it all over and had to give more dowry. So he increased the size of Branwen's dowry. He offered one of the great treasures of Britain, the cauldron that brought dead warriors back to life, which was a huge loss to Bran and the Welsh, and gave this to Matholwich as an offering, and many other things as well. He had to buy his favor back again. It was a very expensive mistake or loss of temper from one of his younger brothers. And so finally the wedding was back on. Branwen and the wedding party, including Bran, travelled over to travelled over to Ireland, and they got married. And during the wedding celebration, the brother did it again. a similar thing, sabotage. His hatred was so all-consuming that he could not see how his actions as an individual would impact other people in such a terrible way. Um, he couldn't imagine the consequences, and he didn't really care about the consequences. Um, and a similar thing happened again, great furore, skirmishes, battles, Branwen mortified, Bran apologetic, trying to sort it out. Anyway, it was all smoothed over in the end. More great offerings, more apologies, offers to punish the brother, all this sort of thing. And so Bran and the delegation went back to Wales. And Branwen started off her married life very well, and all was well. However, the Irish couldn't get over their rage, over what the brother had done. So you can see self-perpetuating actions that form a cycle that you can't escape from. Violence begets violence, this sort of thing. These are the lessons coming up with Branwen in the energy at the moment. And so there's many, many things for us to reflect on about why she may be presenting herself at this time. There's many parallels that we find ourselves in globally and personally. There's a great lesson about finding understanding between warring parties here with Branwen's energy. But eventually, Matholwch was persuaded by the Irish who couldn't get over their anger to punish Branwen and put her aside for what her family had done, even though it was the actions of just one man. So he did so. He put her aside. He put aside their son, and he put her in the kitchens and made her work as a maid. And for 2 years, she worked as a domestic servant. Now, for a princess from a very exalted lineage and a queen, this was a huge insult. But she didn't give up hope. And she, one day, through an act of kindness, nursed a wild starling she had found and helped it nurse it back to health. And she developed a bond with this wild starling, and she taught it to speak. They're famous mimics, starlings, and she taught it a message. And she released it to fly over the sea. And this is why she's associated with birds, ravens, because of Bran and Branwen, the black and white ravens, but also starlings and blackbirds and birds that are mimics and sing beautifully. And she sent this starling over the sea to Bran's court, and it relayed the message of what had happened. And he came over, and there was huge battles, and Branwen tried to placate the two warring parties. She tried to act in a diplomatic way. She tried to get both parties to be empathic towards each other. She tried to get people to see her point of view. She tried to get them to see the wider consequences, but none of them would do so. And there was a huge battle, and only 7 members of that original wedding party returned to Wales, and many, many were killed, including her beloved brother, Bran the Blessed. And he is the one whose head is said to be buried at the Tower of London, which is why they have to keep ravens there, because apparently if the ravens leave, then England will be, or Britain will be lost because Bran is seen as a figurehead. Now, I don't think he's buried on the White Hill in the Tower of London. There's many, many white hills in England, chalky hills. I don't think he's buried there. There's quite a few other contenders, but that's where we celebrate that myth, and that's where we keep ravens, and that's why we keep ravens there. Um, but Branwen's story is tragic. She returned with that party of seven back to Wales and she died of a broken heart because not just the loss of her brother and the loss of her son, but the loss of the potential of her marriage, the loss of life, the futility of the battles, the futility of not being able to get over your anger and your grudges. And Branwen's grave, I believe, is in Anglesey in North Wales or near to Anglesey, between Snowdonia and Anglesey, somewhere around there in the northwest corner of Wales. And you can go and visit her grave if you like. If you're here, please do. I'm sure she'd really appreciate it. She tends to be a more forgotten deity. She is perhaps not as famous a goddess as Rhiannon and Bridie and Arianrhod and Blodeuwedd and but her story is really important, especially at this time, and she is coming forward to tell it. She is the grandmother spirit. She is the one that tries to encourage empathy and forgiveness, even in the hardest of lessons. And I think with this final boss energy coming up, Branwen and Merlin are asking us if you got the chance to do it again, if you got a do-over, as the Americans say, what would you do differently? If you find yourself in a situation you've been in before and you were dreading and you really didn't want to, gosh, there's thunder and lightning outside, fantastic. There's some serious energy going on. If you find yourself in these situations, can you make a different choice to the one that you made last time? Because if we make the same choices in the same situations, we're going to have the same outcomes. And doing the same thing over and over again in the same way and expecting a different outcome is the very different, not just the definition of madness, but it's the definition of karma, carrying those lessons over again and again and again. And we're at a crossroads now, an energetic crossroads, where we have the chance to get rid of, to take off those heavy, heavy burdens that we carry. Can you hear that? Maybe you can't. There's some serious, serious thunder and lightning going on here. Thor's joined us. And if we make a different choice, now Branwen encourages us to take the middle way, to be the peacemaker, to be the empath, to see the argument from the other person's point of view. You may not need to agree with them. You may not need to compromise yourself or your integrity in any way, but you do need to understand why they are taking the position they are taking. Because it, on one hand, it may help you understand where they're coming from, but on the other hand, it may help you understand their psychology, which are equally important. Because sometimes, being empathic doesn't mean that that person that you are understanding their feelings is a good person or is doing the right thing. You don't have to denigrate yourself to understand where they're coming from. It may just be understanding that they're a raging sociopath or narcissist, and then understanding that the reason that they're that way is because hurt people, right? Now, you don't have to fix them, but it helps you make a better and more informed decision if you understand where they're coming from. It's like crossing the road. You need to see where the car is coming from that is approaching, how far away, how fast it's going, whether the person looks like they're going to slow down and stop for you. You make all these micro judgments before you decide whether to cross the road. And these are the micro judgments that Branwen encourages us to make, to help us consciously make a different decision that allows us to move in a different direction, because that's what we're being asked to do. We're being offered an opportunity to make different choices that allow us to move in a different direction. And sometimes that means not taking the yes or the no, or the left or the right, or this way or that way. Sometimes that means completely re-feeling it, not rethinking it, re-feeling it, and taking a third way, a completely different way for a completely different outcome. Now, Merlin, what he wants us to understand at the moment is that rest is as important on your journey, on your spiritual journey, your energetic journey, your grail quest, your hero's journey, heroine's journey, your soul quest, whatever you choose to call it, your understanding of self. Rest is hugely important. That withdrawal, in order to be able to listen to yourself, to identify the voice of yourself. Because the voice you're often hearing is your ego, or other people's expectations. And unless you very deeply meditate or spend a lot of time on your own without distractions, you may not have even identified the true voice of self. And that is what Merlin asks us to do. Now, I'm not talking about rest in the sense of what we all need to do as a society, because we live at a breakneck speed. We're all exhausted. None of us are happy with that way of living. And so changing it up, we all need to do that. But that's not what Merlin's talking about. He's talking about rest and pacing as a valid part of your spiritual journey, your spiritual day, as much as the meditation, the yogic exercise, the going for a run to clear your head, the speaking to a guru, the reading a spiritual book. What he's saying is that the quiet moments are spiritual practice, and they should be built into your day in order to have a well-rounded spiritual development. They are a thing. Being quiet without distractions, listening to yourself, and building that into your day as an activity, like when you have to block out your lunch break in order to ensure you get it. He's talking about that sort of thing. Actually seeing rest, quiet time, contemplation, quietness, just sitting with your eyes shut and breathing and feeling as an activity that you timetable in, because it is as valid as all the other things that we do. He says that this is a game changer. And so it seems particularly prevalent at the moment that he's coming up in order to do this. So in this final boss energy we're not on our charging horse, charging towards this final battle. We are being wise and cunning. We are stepping back, taking our time, steadying ourselves and our energy so we don't react overly in a negative way. We don't even necessarily need to respond immediately to the challenge. We can go away and meditate on it, think about it, sit with it, whatever your practice is, in order to come back with the solution. Now, some of you will be tested in a way that you have to make a split-second decision. Some of your tests as an individual, your final boss energy, may be a test of what are you made of? Who are you when there's no time to decide? That does happen. That's happened previously to me. Because in that split second, you make the decision that betrays your true heart's intent and the true nature of self. And so some of you will find yourself in that situation. So before that happens, before we enter into the really big July and August energies, take some time to think about who you are and what's important to you. And I don't mean what's important to you with regards to spending time with my friends, actually on a really core level: integrity, kindness, empathy, supporting people, things like that, your core values of what genuinely matters for you, not in a performative sense, so that you've brought those awarenesses to the fore, so that when we meet whatever challenge it is that our energy is going to bring forth for our largest piece of final learning, that we are in a space where we make our best and immediate judgment. Now, I would urge you all to connect with Merlin and Branwen, to speak to them, to ask them for guidance and signs. Branwen is associated with ravens, black ravens, starlings, blackbirds. You may see those. Merlin, he likes, well, Branwen likes to leave feathers, Merlin likes to leave feathers, but Merlin is much more likely to actually present himself and say his name, or he may present you with his name in situ. So I've got a very good example because it happened yesterday. Yesterday morning, I woke up and heard the name Merlin in my head. Then I heard a song on the radio and one of the words was Merlin. And then 5 minutes later, I was behind a lorry that was emblazoned with the word Merlin. So when things like that happen, reach out, speak to them, ask them for help and guidance, ask them to bring to the fore of your knowing what would help you in your learning at this time and to deal with these energies. And just go and lay down with your eyes shut, deep breathe, ask them to speak to you. They might just come and talk to you, which you would find invaluable, I'm sure. But that even if you're not a person that can do that, the lessons that Merlin and Branwen bring to us are really important to hold in our consciousness at this time, and they're here to help. So please do read their stories, have a think about what their stories say to you, and the very best of luck on your final boss energy.